The sun burned white over the Arizona Territory, 1877, turning the dirt road of Dust Mill into a river of heat and noise. Horses stamped, traders shouted, and the smell of sweat and tobacco clung to every breath. Through the dust walked Isadora Isa McKinley, her once fine silk dress dulled by travel and shame. Her father, Henry, eyes bloodshot from whiskey and failure, clutched her wrist like a man dragging his own guilt. When Bart Crowley, a thick-necked rancher with a cruel grin, held out a slip of paper and a pouch of coins, Henry didn't look her in the eye. The deal was struck. His daughters sold like livestock. Laughter rippled through the crowd. Only one man didn't join them, Thatcher Kane, tall, silent, a scar cutting across his neck. His jaw tightened. Isa's eyes met his for a fleeting heartbeat, a spark of defiance amid despair. They called him the Silent Rancher, a man whose voice had been stolen by sorrow and a knife's edge. Years ago, Thatcher Kane had spoken once too loudly in defense of his sister, a girl sold to a miner's camp and never seen again. The scar on his throat told the rest of that story. Now, he lived between the ridges west of Dust Mill, his ranch quiet but alive, horses well-fed, fences mended, the air filled with the creak of wind through cedar boards. He spoke only with his hands, or not at all. Folks said his silence was a curse. Others called it peace. But when his eyes found Isa that day in town, something long buried stirred again. Meanwhile, Bart Crowley's ranch waited for her, a place of shadows and rot where laughter came cruel and nights were long, with no doors that locked from inside. The door slammed behind her with a clang that echoed like a sentence. The room Bart Crowley called her quarters smelled of rust, mold, and feed, a windowless cage stacked with cracked crates and coiled rope. Isa sat on the dirt floor, her back against splintered boards, heartbeat loud enough to fill the silence. Each night, Bart's voice came through the wall, threats, laughter, the sound of boots pacing. But Isa never cried. She'd learned that silence, once forced, could also be armor. Days blurred into nights. Bread grew stale. Hope grew thin. Then one midnight, under the whisper of coyotes, she picked a loose splinter from a crate and began prying at the latch. It bit her fingers until blood streaked the wood, but the metal groaned and finally gave. Isa slipped out barefoot, the desert wind slapping her face, thorns tearing at her hem. Behind her, the house snored with drunken sleep. Before her stretched a wasteland of rock and moonlight. She didn't look back. Each step left a smear of blood in the sand, white dress turning red, a living ghost fleeing the life that wanted to bury her alive. That by dawn, Isa's strength was gone. The desert cold bit through her bones, and her breath came shallow as she stumbled into a narrow canyon lined with whispering pines. The moonlight turned her pale skin to glass. She fell to her knees, then to the sand, the world spinning in silver and shadow. Somewhere in the distance, hooves echoed, slow, steady, deliberate. A tall rider emerged, coat flapping like a ghost in the wind. Thatcher Kane dismounted without a word, his eyes scanning the fragile figure before him. He lifted her gently, wrapping her in his weathered duster, the scent of smoke and cedar enveloping her. She woke hours later to warmth, firelight flickering across rough-hewn walls, bandaged feet, a cup of water at her side. On the table lay a small piece of wood, words carved with care, "You are safe." For the first time in years, Isa believed it. Days passed like soft echoes across the canyon. Isa grew stronger beneath Thatcher's quiet care, his hands steady, his gaze gentle, his silence never cold. They spoke through gestures, a shared language of glances and motion. She soon learned what the townsfolk only whispered. His voice had been taken years ago. In a fight to save his sister from a man like Bart, he'd lost more than words that night. He'd lost faith in kindness. But Isa's presence began to change that. She helped mend fences, gathered herbs, and filled his lonely home with faint laughter. One night, they sat beneath a sky scattered with shooting stars. The fire crackled low, and Isa's trembling hands shaped the words, "Thank you." Thatcher paused, then slowly signed back, "You're safe here." Tears welled in both their eyes, to broken hearts finally finding a place where silence felt like peace. The peace of Thatcher's ranch didn't last long. One blood-orange evening, as Isa tied lavender beneath the porch rail, the dogs began to bark, deep, frantic warnings. Dust rose on the trail like smoke. Bart Crowley rode hard through it with 2 armed men at his side, fury twisting his sunburned face. He reined in sharp at the gate, shouting her name like a curse. "She's mine, Kane. Hand her over." Thatcher stood in silence, one hand resting on the post, his gray duster rippling in the wind. He didn't move. He didn't need to. Bart sneered, struck a match, and flung a torch into the barn. In seconds, flames swallowed the dry wood, roaring to the sky. Isa screamed as horses shrieked inside. Without hesitation, Thatcher ran through the fire. Smoke seared his lungs, sparks bit his skin, but he cut the ropes, guiding the terrified animals out. When the roof began to fall, Isa cried, "Don't die for me." Through the blaze, Thatcher turned, soot streaking his face, and smiled faintly, a vow made in silence. When he stumbled from the smoke, alive but burned, Isa fell to her knees. They had survived together, and nothing, no fire, no fear could undo that bond. The days after the fire passed in hushed light and slow breaths. Thatcher lay on the cot, bandages wrapping his arms and chest, his skin raw, but his spirit unbroken. Isa tended to him gently, her trembling hands steady with care. For the first time, she spoke aloud, her voice soft as falling ash. She told him of the convent where she was sent at 14, of the man who stole her innocence, and of the lies that turned her father against her. "He said I was the sin," she whispered, eyes glistening. "So I learned to be silent." Thatcher listened, unmoving, the firelight flickering across his scarred throat. Then he reached for a scrap of wood and his small knife. Carving slowly with blistered hands, "I believe you." The simple words broke her open. Isa pressed her face to his hand and wept, not from sorrow, but from finally being seen. Storm clouds rolled over the ridges as Bart Crowley rode again, this time with ferment and fury burning hotter than the fire he'd set. Rain began to spit across the land, turning dust to mud as hooves thundered toward Thatcher's ranch. Inside, Isa felt the change in the air, a shiver of fate-coming dew. She stepped outside beside Thatcher, who stood calm and wordless, his eyes fixed on the horizon. Bart reined in hard, pistol raised. "I warned you, Kane. She's mine." Isa stepped forward, no longer trembling. "Not yours," she said clearly. "Not ever again." Bart sneered, firing a warning shot into the dirt. In a blur, Thatcher moved, knocking the weapon aside. A fight erupted, fists, boots, rage against resolve. Bart stumbled, grabbed another gun, aimed at Thatcher's back, and thunder cracked. But it wasn't lightning. It was the sheriff's rifle. Deputies swarmed in, surrounding the men. "Drop it, Bart," Keller barked. "We've got your papers, trafficking, arson, assault." Bart's gun hit the mud. Isa faced him, steady and free. "You never owned me," she said, voice strong. "Not my body, not my voice." Rain poured down, washing the dust clean. Justice finally spoken. Weeks passed, and the charred smell of smoke slowly faded into the scent of rain and new earth. Isa and Thatcher worked side by side, rebuilding what the fire had taken. Each swing of his hammer, each plank she carried, felt like stitching the world back together. When the last ashes cooled, they knelt in the blackened soil and pressed lavender seeds into the earth, tiny promises of life rising from ruin. In town, Isa stood before the courthouse, her voice steady as she told her story to a silent crowd. Her father's crimes were laid bare, his greed stripped of excuses. When she returned home, Thatcher was waiting by the half-built fence, the horizon washed gold. She touched his hand, then signed softly. "It'll bloom in summer, like me." He smiled, answering. And last, like us, the wind carried their laughter through fields reborn from ash. The sun melted low across the horizon, painting the land in shades of gold and lavender. The rebuilt ranch stood quiet, fences gleaming new, horses grazing in the calm evening light. Isa sat on the porch steps, her cotton dress brushing the dust, watching the wind sway through the lavender they had planted together. Beside her, Thatcher settled into a handmade rocking chair carved from the barn's charred beams. They didn't speak, they never needed to. Their hands found each other easily, fingers intertwining, hearts steady in the hush of twilight. Above them, the sky blazed with color, a reminder that even after fire, beauty returns. A gentle voice rose over the scene. Not all love is loud. Some steady, some rooted, some eternal. What would you have done if you were Thatcher? Risk everything for a stranger's freedom? Share your thoughts below, hit like, and subscribe for more Wild West love stories, where silence speaks louder than words.